UFC Abu Dhabi, Robert Whittaker versus Reiner the Ritter is taking place this weekend, and this is an absolute banger of a fight night card. Some may say it's even better than UFC 318. At least name value wise, I'm very excited because from top to bottom, this card is absolutely stacked. Now, there are some fights that I'm not necessarily going to be all that hyped for, but I'm going to be covering every single fight. So, here are all my predictions, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. Oh, by the way, you guys, I'm going to be using Tapology from now on because I'm getting sick of the UFC website. The UFC website doesn't update anything. Like, as you guys can see here down below, we have a couple of canceled fights. Mobs Arevloya versus Aaron Pico. I covered this in a video previously a few days ago. Mobs Arevloya pulled out. And Asu Almabaev and Ramazan Timirov. That got canceled because Tamarov withdrew. All right. The UFC doesn't bother to update anything, and they still have these matchups on their official website. So from now on, I'm just going to be using Tapology because even though the graphics look a lot smaller, they're at least up to date with what's going on. And overall, Tapology actually does a better job of keeping up to date with the matchups. So yeah, from now on, I'm going to be using Topology, even though the graphics are overall smaller. With that being said, we're going to be starting off with the people's main event with Martin Buday versus Marcus Buchecha. Everybody's going to be tuning in to watch Martin Buday versus Marcus Buchecha. I'm going to go with Marcus Buchecha. Now, I'm not just saying this because it's Martin Buday, arguably lost to 44-year-old Andrei Arlovsky in 2024. Uh, hasn't looked good in any of his fights. Got literally destroyed by Shamil the Blob Gaziev. But I watched Marcus Buchecha in his 1FC fights. He actually looks pretty good. His grappling's really sick to watch. He's very fast at taking the back and just like transitioning to dominant positions. There is a worry for me that if he can't find the submission against Martin Buday, like Marcus Buchecha can look incredibly mid, but I don't think Martin Buday is gonna offer that much resistance against a world class BJJ uh fighter like Marcus Buchecha because it's fucking Martin Buday. All right. I don't think I really need to explain myself again. Like Martin Buday, simply put, I don't rate him. I don't know how he's number 13 in the UFC heavyweight division. If anything, that just shows how shit the heavyweight division really is. But I think Marcus Buchecha should be able to get this fight within the first or second round due to like rear naked choke or something. Like there is a worry Martin Buday might be able to survive and just pour it on Marcus Buchecha. But Martin Buday is not about to knock out anybody. And plus, Marcus Buchecha is actually a fit heavyweight who's like athletic, which is certainly more than whatever Martin Buday has been able to show within his last 3 or 4 fights. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Marcus Buchecha to get like a second round submission, or maybe a first or second round. All right, moving on, we got Mohammad Yahya versus Stephen Nguyen. Now, I have no idea who Stephen Nguyen is. All right, I'm just gonna be real. I know he fought once in the UFC, but I didn't really watch his fight. I'm just not picking Mohammad Yahya. All right, I think that's very fair to say. He got knocked out in the first round by Kyle Fernandez, and even before then, I don't think he looked all that good in his contender series fights and stuff. So, Stephen Nguyen, there's a chance that Muhammad Yahya wins this fight. Stephen Nguyen, he's relatively unproven, and he is a featherweight moving up to lightweight. But I'm just not picking Muhammad Yahya to ever win a fight until he actually wins. All right, I think that's fair to say. Muhammad Yahya, simply put, is just not UFC caliber. The only reason he's on this card is because he's from the UAE, and the UAE wants to just feature their fighter, even though their fighter is absolutely terrible. So I'm gonna go with Stephen Nguyen. Probably get a first or second round knockout because it's Muhammad Yahya in the year of 2025. And hopefully Muhammad Yahya gets cut from the UFC after this because no hate on him. I just don't think he's UFC caliber in the first place. All right, now moving on, we got Aslan versus Billy Elekana. Now, I'm gonna go with Billy Elekana on this one. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go with Aslan. Now, Billy Alakana, he looked pretty good against Bogdan Guskov in his UFC debut. But the thing is, right? Billy Alakana, I know he looked really good in his grappling. He's not really used to going with his grappling. Now, is grappling a weakness of Aslan? Yes. So there is a concern that Aslan might just look like a fish out of water and get submitted within the first or second round. Problem, however, is that Billy Elikana is not exactly a submission artist. Like, sure, he can wrestle, he can control the back, he can hold dominant position here and there, but he has one submission in like 9 fights, and that was to a guillotine where he fucking jumped it, right? Like Dustin Poirier. So I don't really think that Billy Alcon is going to come out here and submit Ebo Aslan. And on the feet, yes, Ebo Aslan's incredibly sloppy and like he's basically a marauding maxer. But I don't think Billy Alcon is really going to throw anything to get the respect out of Ebo Aslan. I think Ebo Aslan will be able to walk through the punches of Billy Alcana because Billy Alcana is a lanky middleweight moving up to the light heavyweight division, whereas Ebo Aslan is a juice to the gills actual light heavyweight. So I'm gonna say that Ebo Aslan, uh, unless he gets submitted, like I don't know, his grappling is concerning, but I don't think Billy Alcana has the submission game to submit Ebo Aslan. So I'm gonna say that Ebo Aslan is gonna get the job done via round 1 or 2 knockout. All right, now moving on, we got Amanda Ribas versus Tabatha Ricci. I'm gonna go with Tabatha Ricci. Now, I don't want to pick Tabatha Ricci. I don't think Tabatha Ricci is all that good. However, the only reason I'm gonna pick Tabatha Ricci is because the UFC simps for her. Like, we all know that this is the type of women's MMA fight that's gonna go to a 29-28 close decision where they're just shadow boxing out of range. Occasionally they'll land some shots, and occasionally someone will land a takedown and just stay in top guard. Alright? That's the fight that I'm envisioning in my head. And in a fight like that, Tabatha Ricci usually wins. Tabatha Ricci, the UFC just puts her on there to for her to shake her ass. All right, like I've never really watched a Tabatha Ricci fighting one. Yeah, I think she won. Unless, like, I know there's a couple of times where Tabatha Ricci was able to get the submissions and stuff, but every time there's a close fight where you don't think Tabatha Ricci's gonna win, or it's like very controversial 50-50, Tabatha Ricci is gonna find a way to pull off a victory. All right, I don't see Amanda Ribas really knocking her out. I don't see Amanda Ribas really schooling her on the feet. It's not like Amanda Ribas is out here just throwing like multiple piece combinations like Yan Jiaonan. I see this to be a very competitive fight. I don't see Amanda Ribas really dominating on the ground because Tabitha Ricci's ground game's actually pretty good. So I'm gonna say that Tabitha Ricci is probably gonna win this fight 29-28. Like even if you don't think it's gonna work out for Tabitha Ricci, like you know that Tabitha Ricci's gonna win. So Amanda Ribas, she either needs to dominate all 3 rounds or just knock Tabitha Ricci out because I don't think she's gonna get a submission. And I don't think she's going to win a close decision because every close decision somehow favors Tabitha Ricci. So yeah, Tabitha Ricci should get the job done via decision. Maybe a bullshit decision at that. All right, now moving on, we got Damon Blackshear versus Davey Grant. Now this is an actual banger of a fight, right? I'm actually really excited to watch this fight because I think these guys are like very underrated in both of their careers. Like I know both of these guys have very ugly records. Damon Blackshear 17-7, Davey Grant 14-7. Not exactly the best records, but like you watch their skills and you can tell these guys are really good. As for who I think is gonna win, however, as much as I like Davey Grant, I'm gonna have to go with Damon Blackshear on this one. Like, is there a chance that Davey Grant can just outclass Damon Blackshear on the feet? Yes, Davey Grant's very good on the feet, and Damon Blackshear is a slow starter. And if you give momentum to a guy like Davey Grant, guy's very hard to knock out or do anything against. That being said, I just think Damon Blackshear is the overall more well-rounded fighter. Like Davey Grant, like he's been submitted a lot in his career, and Damon Blackshear is like I think he's one of the best submission artists in the bantamweight division. Like maybe not pure grappling wise. I know his wrestling isn't all that like dominant compared to like a Marab or a Umar Nurmagomedov. But in terms of pure submission and jujitsu capabilities, I think Damon Blackshear is the best in the division. And if the fight hits the ground, Damon Blackshear is going to twist up Davey Grant up like a pretzel. Now, Davey Grant, I know it's been a while since he's been submitted. Like, it's been a very long time. But I'm not really going to pick Davey Grant to somehow be able to survive the submissions of Damon Blackshear. Like, Davey Grant picked up jujitsu kind of in like the middle of his MMA career. And I'm not really expecting him to improve that drastically in his grappling to where he can defend the submissions of Damon Blackshear when he's like 38 years old. And again, Damon Blackshear, maybe he gets outstruck on the feet. Again, he is a very slow starter, which is concerning. By rounds 2 or 3, when the fight does take place on the ground, I think Damon Blackshear will be able to find the submission easily. And plus, Damon Blackshear is improving on the feet. Now, I don't advise him to really fight on the feet against Davy Grant because if that happens, I think Davy Grant obviously wins. But I don't think Damon Blackshear, the gap in their striking is as big as the gap in the grappling between each other. So I'm gonna pick Damon Blackshear to win this by second or third round submission. Maybe he gets outstruck on the feet in the first round, but by the second round, I think Damon Blackshear is gonna wake up. And I think unless Davy Grant puts him away, but I don't really see Davy Grant putting him away. Davy Grant is a rangy kickboxer who like really needs to put a lot of combinations together in order to really separate himself from the opponent. And I don't really seeing that work against Damon Blackshear. Like you got to really put away Damon Blackshear like a Montel Jackson did in order to beat Damon Blackshear on the feet. So I'm gonna say that Damon Blackshear wins this fight by second round submission. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. All right, now moving on, we got Muslim Salikhov versus Carlos Leal. I'm gonna go with Carlos Leal. Now, I understand that Muslim Salikhov's coming off a win against Song Kanan, and he looked really good, showed the vintage wheel kick and all that stuff. But Carlos Leal, I think he's a legitimate prospect. Muslim Salikhov is like 40 years old. Whereas Carlos Leal, just hitting his prime, uh, looked really good against Alex Morono. Now, I know it's Alex Morono, but Carlos Leal literally butchered him in like a minute or so, and I actually felt really bad for Alex Morono in the fight. And in his debut on short notice, Carlos Leal like whooped Renat Fakhretdinov's ass. I don't care what the Abu Dhabi judges were saying. I clearly thought that Carlos Leal won that fight. Now, there is a concern that the judges might be on some bullshit again because the last time Carlos Leal went to Abu Dhabi, uh, they robbed this man in broad daylight. Somehow Carlos Leal won all 3 rounds against Renat Fakhretdinov, yet the all 3 judges gave the fight to Renat Fakhretdinov. But I don't think Muslim Salikhov is necessarily like as well rounded as a Renat Fakhretdinov. Like I think he's much older than Renat, which is also a concern considering Carlos Leal will bully any old man he fights. And I just think that maybe if Muslim Salikhov can land a wheel kick, that's his like only chance. Because if he doesn't find it and he gets gassed out, which he typically is prone to, Carlos Leal will start to hound him, and he'll probably knock him out by the end of the first, maybe the second round. So I'm gonna go with Carlos Leal to win this by vicious KO. All right, now moving on, we got Bryce Mitchell versus Said Nurmagomedov. Now, this is a very interesting fight. Bryce Mitchell making his debut in the bantamweight division, and Said Nurmagomedov, like although he's had a couple of losses, he's still relatively good. He's a relatively known name in the bantamweight division. So and they both have like very similar grappling styles where they're just fucking hunting for submissions all the time. That being said, I'm gonna go with Said Nurmagomedov. Like, there's a chance that Bryce Mitchell can outpace Said Nurmagomedov. Now, Said Nurmagomedov doesn't exactly have the best gas tank in the world, but there's just certain patterns in Bryce Mitchell and that's very concerning in this matchup. Like Said Nurmagomedov, He has a nasty guillotine, and Bryce Mitchell's very known for giving up his neck every time he shoots for a single leg. All right, that's the Bryce Mitchell special. In exchange for giving up the neck, he's like very good at trying to tip over balance against opponents. But against a guy who has like a very good guillotine or a ninja choke, like Nurmagomedov, I don't think that's gonna work very well. And on the feet, I think Nurmagomedov's so much faster than Bryce Mitchell. Now, I don't think Nurmagomedov's not necessarily gonna knock him out, and I don't think Nurmagomedov has the knockout potential in this matchup. But he's much faster than Bryce Mitchell, and even if Nurmagomedov guesses out, I can see him picking apart Bryce Mitchell for at least 2 rounds, and especially because again, Bryce Mitchell's moving down to the bantamweight division. Nurmagomedov, like he's a legitimate bantamweight, whereas Bryce Mitchell, he's a featherweight moving down to bantamweight, where the fights are typically much faster and the athletes in the bantamweight division are typically much more skilled. Now, there's a chance that Bryce Mitchell can use his size and just wrestle fuck Nurmagomedov. You never know. But I'm gonna say that Nurmagomedov wins this fight. It's tough to say. I don't think he's gonna get a knockout. Maybe he can get a submission, but more likely it's gonna be Nurmagomedov winning the first 2 rounds. And then maybe in the third round, Bryce Mitchell mounts a comeback, but by then it's gonna be a little bit too late. So I'm gonna say that Nurmagomedov wins this fight via decision. All right, now moving on, we got Nikita Krylov versus Bogdan Guskov. Now this is also a very interesting fight because Nikita Krylov, at one point he was the dark horse of the light heavyweight division, but now he's coming off a loss against Dominic Reyes in the first round. Meanwhile, Bogdan Guskov, he's looked very good in most of his fights, but recently he hasn't looked as good against opponents that we expect him to put away in the first round. All right. That being said, I'm gonna go with Nikita Krylov. You know what? Yeah, I'm gonna go with Nikita Krylov. Like normally, Nikita Krylov, I would say like, oh, he looked very off in his last fight against Dominic Reyes, and especially because he's coming off a knockout. Like there are concerns for Nikita Krylov's once invincible chin. Maybe it's not the same after the 2-year layoff. Maybe it's not like he's not as proactive in his approach to the fight game. But I think Nikita Krylov, I think he's locking back in because we don't really see Krylov really taking fights this early, even off a loss. And I think now that he got the cobwebs out of his way, I think he's gonna be much more like looking like the old Nikita Krylov. Now Bogdan Gushkov, there's a chance that he might knock out Nikita Krylov. Again, Nikita Krylov did just come off a KO loss, but the way Dominic Reyes KO'd Nikita Krylov, it was by Dominic Reyes with the signature step back left hand. Bogdan Guskov ain't throwing a step back left hand, let alone a step back in the first place. Bogdan Guskov is gonna meet Nikita Krylov in the fire, and I just think that Nikita Krylov is a lot better in the fire, right? Like we gotta like keep in mind. I know he lost to Dominic Reyes. Nikita Krylov looks really good when he's on, right? Like that was the whole reason why I picked him against Dominic Reyes in the first place. Like Nikita Krylov, if his opponent isn't backing up and trying to meet him in the middle, he will fuck people. He will fuck people up. Like he will do that. He will absolutely destroy people. Like look at his fight with Alexander Gustafsson. Like look at his fight with Ryan Spann. Like I know it's fucking Ryan Spann, but still, like I thought it was very impressive from Nikita Krylov. Plus, you got to consider this: Bogdan Gushkov. His grappling isn't all that good, and Nikita Krylov, although he doesn't use his grappling all that much, he has a very good submission game when he needs it. And I know he got knocked out in his last fight, but that's because he didn't have time to implement his grappling. And I think if Nikita Krylov is able to use his wrestling and grappling in general, I think Bogdan Gushkov is in a world of trouble. So I'm going to say that Nikita Krylov probably gets it done by like second round submission, maybe the first round. But yeah, I just think that Nikita Krylov is one, the more well rounded fighter, and two, now that he's like locking back in, I just think he's better like in terms of skill in the first place. So I'm going to say that Nikita Krylov gets this done by finish. All right, now moving on, we got Asua Mabayev versus Jose Ochoa. I'm gonna go with Jose Ochoa. Now, Jose Ochoa is coming in as a short notice replacement, so there's a chance that Almabaev will look like the much fresher fighter in the later rounds. There's a chance that Jose Ochoa will gas out early, but I'm gonna say that Jose Ochoa is just much better than Almabaev on the feet. Like, can Almabaev take him down and try to work his grappling and all that? Yes. But Almabaev isn't exactly a submission artist. Like, he took Ode Osborne to the third round before he could find a rear naked choke. He took CJ Vergara to a decision. All right. These are guys that like are notoriously known for a lack of grappling defense. Now, Jose Ochoa, I don't know where his grappling defense is at. Maybe it's actually really bad. Maybe it's not as good as people think just because he defended the takedowns against Cody Durden. Doesn't mean he's going to be able to withstand the control of Almabaev. But I thought Jose Ochoa looked good in the transitions against Cody Durden. Now, I understand that Almabaev is much better than Cody Durden. And also, Jose Ochoa is taking this fight on short notice. But again, if Jose Ochoa can survive on the ground, then on the feet, I think he's just much slicker than Almabaev. I think Almabaev is a sitting duck. We saw that in the fight against Manel Cap, where Manel Cap was just toying with Almabaev. Now, you could point to all the eye pokes and all the cheating that Manel Cap was doing throughout their fight, but I don't know, like even without the cheating, Manel Cap was clearly the better striker of the two, like by a mile. And I think Jose Ochoa, maybe he's not the level of a Manel Cap, but I think he's comparatively close, at least closer than Almabaev. So I'm gonna say that Jose Ochoa probably just outstrikes Almabaev. Maybe a second round KO. You know, Jose Ochoa does have some vicious knockout power, and he is very gritty. So I'm gonna say that Jose Ochoa, short notice, will get the job done against Almabaev. All right, now moving on to the feature fight of the card, we got Shara Magomedov versus Marc-Andre Barriault. This is pretty straightforward. I'm gonna go with Shara Magomedov. Marc-Andre Barriault, like I know he's a marauder and like he's looked like an absolute world beater against some guys. Those guys are fucking Bruno Silva, who should have retired like 3 years ago. And outside of that, what has Marc-Andre Barriault done over the last couple of years? Got knocked out by Dustin Stoltzfus. Got knocked out by Joe Pyfer in the first round. Lost to Chris Curtis, who I don't think is all that good as especially now. And I think Shara Magomedov, like maybe he doesn't have the knockout potential of like all the guys I mentioned before, but I just think Shara Magomedov will be able to pick apart his shots against Marc-Andre Barriault. This is a very tailor-made matchup for Shara Magomedov. Marc-Andre Barriault is a plotty plotster who is probably just gonna try to swing meaty hooks in the pocket. Nurmagomedov isn't going to allow you to do that. Nurmagomedov loves to fight on the outside. The kicks will be a lot of trouble for Marc-Andre Barriault. And I could just see Nurmagomedov being able to pick apart Marc-Andre Barriault over the course of 3 rounds. Maybe get a knockout, but it's not like Nurmagomedov has like all that crazy knockout potential. So I'm going to be safe and say that Nurmagomedov wins this fight 30-27, where he's just picking apart Marc-Andre Barriault. Unless Marc-Andre Barriault all of a sudden comes out here and tries to grapple, I don't really see that happening in the first place. And even if he does, I don't think he's all that impressive in the clinch and all that grappling transitions. So yeah, it's gonna be very hard for Marc-Andre Barriault unless he finds the knockout shot. So yeah, Nurmagomedov should win this fight 30-27, 29-28, but it's gonna be a pretty clear decision regardless. All right, now moving on to the co-main event, we got Petr Yan versus Marcus Mcghee. You guys know I love Petr Yan, so I'm gonna go with Petr Yan. Now, I'm not just saying this because I'm a Petr Yan glazer, but let's look at what Marcus Mcghee has done. All right, went to an exciting fight with Gaston Bolaños, where he got the finish eventually. All right, that was a pretty good fight. He fought Jonathan Martinez in November of 2024. Now, Marcus Mcghee looked good, but did that fight really tell anyone that all of a sudden Marcus Mcghee is going to beat up Petr Yan? I don't think so. Marcus Mcghee, he was able to rip apart Jonathan Martinez for their first 2 rounds of their fight. Is Petr Yan about to let him do that? No. Like, sure, Peter Yan may give up a round or so, but unlike Jonathan Martinez, Peter Yan is not retarded. Peter Yan is giving up rounds or like minutes of the fight in order to download data. And because Peter Yan, although like he's a slow starter and stuff, he knows that this is a 3 round fight and he's going to be more active, all right, especially in the second round. And I think Peter Yan, maybe he'll give up the first round where Marcus Mcghee is like ripping a bunch of boxing combinations. Marcus Mcghee will look good, 10-9 Marcus Mcghee. But by the second round, Peter Yan is actually going to use his brain, unlike Jonathan Martinez, and actually mix things up. Peter Yan is not just his boxing defense and boxing combinations that are like arguably the best in the bantamweight division. He's very, very well rounded. Like his kicks are very snappy. Uh, he's got very good clinch game. He's got very good dirty boxing, which is very underrated in his game. His wrestling's incredible. I know Marab kind of just fucking shot 50 takedowns, but that's because it's Marab, all right? Marcus Mcghee is not about to shoot 50 takedowns on Peter Yan. And I think Peter Yan is going to be able to pace himself. And by the third round, which we've seen Marcus Mcghee kind of gas out, I think Peter Yan will be able to take over the fight and win this fight 29-28, where slowly but surely Peter Yan's going to be able to put a hole away. There are some concerns again, like Marcus Mcghee might just rip apart Peter Yan in the first round. But again, unlike Jonathan Martinez, I just think Peter Yan is a much more well-rounded fighter, and I don't think he's going to be as tentative as Jonathan Martinez because he is a more well-rounded fighter than Jonathan Martinez. So Peter Yan should win this fight 29-28. Maybe it's going to be a controversial decision, but I think it's going to be clear that Peter Yan is going to be the better mixed martial artist. Now, moving on to the main event, we got Robert Whittaker versus Reiner de Ridder. Like, I watched both of their fights. Now, everything based off what I watched tells me that Robert Whittaker is the much better fighter, right? Robert Whittaker not only beat the better opposition, Robert Whittaker can do just more things in his game. Like sure, Reiner de Ridder came off the win against Bo Nickel, where he body knee TKO'd him. Alright? Is Reiner de Ridder about to do that against Robert Whittaker? No, because Robert Whittaker is a legitimate fighter who's actually conditioned, unlike Bo Nickel. And also the fact, Reiner de Ridder, I'm not forgetting the fight with GM3. All right, I understand. I always make jokes about how GM3 is the GOAT. GM3 in the third round is unstoppable, and I understand that Reiner de Ridder submitted GM3 in the third round, but Reiner de Ridder got dropped on the feet by GM3. That's very concerning. I understand that de Ridder also beat Kevin Holland, but Kevin Holland it's kind of a tailor-made matchup for Reiner de Ridder because de Ridder is actually gritty and he actually likes to grapple, whereas Kevin Owens just like, ew, grappling, go away from me. And like when he's fighting like someone who actually wants to like engage in the wrestling and stuff. And now Robert Whittaker, I understand that he got ragdolled by Hamza Chimaev. It's Hamza Chimaev, all right. I understand that he got knocked out by DDP. It's Dricus Duplessis, all right. Do I rate Reiner de Ridder the same as DDP and Hamza Chimaev? I don't think so. I don't think I don't think Hamza Chimaev or like DDP is gonna get dropped by GM3 in the first round. Right? I don't think Hamza Chimaev or DDP is gonna take Bo Nickel as the first round. I think Reiner de Ridder, like sure, he might have some grappling success against Robert Whittaker. Is he gonna submit him like Hamza Chimaev? I don't think so. Maybe Reiner de Ridder's just that good, and I'm still underrating him. But literally based off what we've seen, like I just don't think that Reiner de Ridder is the same capability as Hamza Chimaev. And there's no shame in that. There really isn't. Hamza Chimaev is like the best submission artist in the upper weight classes. But I just don't think Reiner de Ridder is gonna bring the same amount of pressure as Hamza Chimaev. Now there are some concerns that Robert Whittaker can get size mocked. Reiner de Ridder is a huge middleweight, and Robert Whittaker has lost a lot of fights where opponents have been able to size mock him. But I just think Robert Whittaker's much more skilled, Robert Whittaker, like, again, there's a concern about the chinny chin chin. Like, Robert Whittaker has been known for getting chinned a lot. And he is coming off that brutal submission loss where Hamza Chimaev literally face cranked him and his teeth caved in. I just don't think Reiner the Ritter's as good as Hamza Chimaev. I just it's just that. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, based on the tape alone, Robert Whittaker should win this fight. All right. I have a bad feeling that Reiner de Ritter can win because Reiner de Ritter has like seemingly plot armor that's unbeatable right now. But logic tells me that Robert Whittaker is going to win this fight. So I'm going to say that Robert Whittaker is going to win this fight. Probably by like 48, 47, 49, 46 decision, or maybe he gives up some dominant grappling positions in the first and second round. But in the later rounds, I think Robert Whittaker is going to be able to mix in his combinations, start defending the takedowns better, and just ultimately pick his shots in the later rounds. All right, that's going to be it for today's video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about UFC Fight Night Abu Dhabi. Again, I think this is absolutely stacked. Hopefully, this doesn't turn out to be a UFC Baku situation where on paper the card was absolutely beautiful to look at, but in execution, things didn't pan out all that well. All right, it's been happening recently, especially for fight nights. So hopefully, UFC Abu Dhabi can actually produce some high level fights that are entertaining to watch. But yeah, other than that, I'm gonna be going on vacation soon, so you guys might see a background change within like next week. So if you guys notice that, don't freak out. And other than that, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.